Good morning, and thank you all for showing up here this morning. Yesterday, we filed the first class action following the announcement of a significant data breach affecting one of the largest credit banks in the country, Capital One. That affected 100 million United States citizens and 6 million Canadians. We filed that lawsuit to hold Capital One accountable. The suit was filed as a putative class action in the Eastern District of Virginia, where Capital One is based. For those of you who are unfamiliar with class action litigation, we filed the case on behalf of Dwayne Baird, seeking to represent all affected consumers in the United States. One of the most significant parts of the case after the company files an answer will be to move for class certification, where the court will make a determination of whether the case should proceed as a class action and bind and provide relief for all affected consumers. It's a typical procedural mechanism in United States courts. I've handled a significant number of privacy cases, including data breach cases, where we seek similar class litigation. As you all know, recently the court gave preliminary approval in San Jose, California, to the Yahoo data breach, which affected 2.9 billion users worldwide. The class consists of 194 million Americans and approximately 270,000 Israeli citizens. And then, of course, on the heels of that, I was a part of a team of lawyers who negotiated the Equifax settlement, which affected approximately 147 million individuals. The significance of those cases and the ones that followed before that, Target, Home Depot, to name a few, is it was certainly a red flag to any company that held information to maintain that information in a very secure environment, which unfortunately did not occur here. Companies are obligated, to the extent that they collect sensitive information of consumers, to maintain that information in as secure as possible an environment. This is one of the largest breaches of a company who put that information on a cloud. Most information, as you know, to think of it as we would think of it, would be in a system of computers, and cyber criminals who get into those computers through malware or some other means then extract information. This information was hosted by Amazon Web Services for Capital One, and through one of its former employees, she was able to gain access to this information. One of the things I would note of significance is when this was announced, it was announced through an indictment of an individual in Seattle, Washington. It was one count for lawyers who have done criminal work, whether it be on the side of the prosecutor or the defense, for a breach of this type to result in only a one count indictment indicates to me, at least, and certainly other lawyers who've done this type of criminal work, that this defendant is probably cooperating with the government, that there are other individuals who the government is seeking, and that, of course, is a concern for the reason that this information may have been taken by this individual, but where she then gave that or sold that information is a serious concern. We all have heard something called the dark web. The dark web is a marketplace on the internet where cyber criminals exchange information. They place it on the web to sell, and they buy it. And the one reason information is taken and placed on the web is for malicious purposes. It's to monetize it. One of the things we now know in the 21st century is that information is the new currency of the 21st century. Some of the biggest companies on the face of the earth are really based upon information. They don't make anything. For instance, Facebook, Google, companies of extreme worth and value trade on the information that we provide to it in connection with using whether it be Facebook or Google. I understand, based upon a press release from Capital One, that Capital One's CEO has taken responsibility for this, and that's a great step in the right direction. Seeing how the company responds now to consumers who now will be affected by this will be the next significant event. Companies all too often act out of consequence, not conscience. Had this company been more on guard with the information protected, we wouldn't have had that. Now that the company has lost that information to a cyber criminal and perhaps cyber criminals, it's going to be very interesting to see how the company responds. How are consumers affected? Well, one of the immediate things, if you're one of the 100 million individuals, you need to freeze your credit. You need to make certain that you have a credit monitoring or identity theft protection that is out there monitoring to see if your information is being used. You should ensure that you check your bank statements, your credit card statements. You file a report with the police department, with the FTC, with the FBI, with the IRS, with the FTC. All of those agencies collect information and constantly look for manners in which information is being misused. Have people been damaged yet? That's a question I would imagine some people might ask. They certainly have in connection with how they've responded to this data breach. They've taken time. Time in the United States of America is compensable. That's how most Americans make a living. They're compensated based upon their time. If we're not working, then what are we doing? We're enjoying our time. And to the extent that people had to take time from work or time from the enjoyment of life to dedicate to take the steps, some of the steps that I've indicated, that's a compensable injury under the law in this country. To the extent that credit, information, or other personal identification is taken and misused to their detriment, that of course is another form of damages. Those are the types of things that the lawsuits that I've settled in the past, Yahoo for instance, have sought to provide relief for affected consumers. Are there any questions?
How much are you guys hoping to get in relief, and how many clients do you have, or do you have any clients yet so far in this?
Well, obviously,
besides the one that you mentioned.
Obviously, Mr. Baird, and we've been contacted by hundreds of individuals. The firm of Morgan & Morgan is well known around the country. We have a significant call center in Orlando, in Tampa, Atlanta, and the phone has been literally ringing off the hook of consumers who are concerned, who have been affected in some way. We're collecting that information, and we'll use that in connection with the pursuit of our lawsuit.
Who are the defendants?
The defendant that I've sued is Capital One. Are there other defendants that may be included? Of course. As the case develops, as we gather more information through our investigation, we may extend the breach, the extent of who we're going to sue. Immediately upon being contacted by Mr. Baird of his desire to file a lawsuit, I retained 3 of the most prominent experts in the world, both in terms of cybersecurity and the way in which information is monetized on the dark web. Those experts are now monitoring activity on the dark web as well as collecting information from other sources to ascertain who is responsible in what way.
Do you think Amazon is a potential defendant in light of the fact that it maintained the cloud?
It is a potential defendant. Obviously, its former employee was one of the ones who used her credentials to exploit a vulnerability that she knew about. But again, Capital One is the most responsible party because it was the one that collected credit applications and stored those applications on the cloud. Its decision not to put it within a box, so to speak, in its corporate headquarters was a decision it made for purposes probably based upon economy.
Do you know how far back this goes for Capital One?
So we don't know that yet, but if you consider 100 million credit applications for U.S. citizens only, it has to go back at least several years. I mean, we have, 300 million people in this country, and not all of them have credit. Some of them are children under the age of 18. So certainly Capital One has a tremendous saturation in the credit card market, but I would assume it goes back years. Which raises another question, is why did the company keep that kind of information? Once you extend credit to someone, then your obligation is defined by that contract with Capital One. Why it kept that information, why it didn't try to better secure it, is a question that we'll be raising in the lawsuit.
Should people who think they've been impacted contact you, or is this gonna be kind of like Equifax where down the line you can check if you were impacted?
So most states, in fact every state has a data breach statute which requires Capital One to notify every affected consumer. I would expect that notification to be by US mail. That's probably the way Capital One deals with most of its customers, so they'll be receiving in the next 30 to 60 days, depending upon what state they live in, a notification of whether they've been affected. Obviously consumers, whether or not they know if they've been affected, if you have a Capital One account or you've been denied credit but submitted an application, your information may have been impacted based upon the number. And consumers need to take action to protect themselves. And some of the steps that I've outlined. If people want to call for further questions, since this is one of my major practice areas, I certainly would be willing to help them answer any questions that they might have.
Do you think at the end of the day it's going to be like Equifax? We'll give you $125 or credit monitoring, or
Well,
what's a relief?
Okay. So, in every data breach case that I've settled, and I was part of the team in Equifax, a sum of money was set aside. In Equifax, it's $125 million to take care of out-of-pocket losses, with the company obligated to pay another $125 million. The $125 that you mentioned, which is actually $100 up to $358 in Yahoo, is to compensate people who already have credit monitoring. So, for instance, I have credit monitoring through a service that I have. If I was impacted by Equifax, then rather than not be able to take advantage of the credit monitoring they're offering for up to 10 years, I could get $125. So, you know, I think that's been misreported by the press. There's $31 million of the $700 million that have been set aside for that $125 payment, but it's actually a much larger bucket for out-of-pocket losses. So, for instance, if I have to spend time, which, as I mentioned, is a compensable component, then that money is available to pay for that. And that's one of the major components of relief that we see, along with, say, if somebody had a run on their credit, they didn't have money to pay rent, they got evicted, there were damages as a consequence of that, then these settlements typically take care of that. And to date, I have not been involved in a case where we did not settle for enough money to compensate people for the claims that they have had. So one of the other things that you might have read about is that certain types of information was taken. One of the things that cyber criminals have become very good at is creating synthetic identities. So, for instance, if they have my name and address, they know I work at Morgan & Morgan, they can begin to pull things that are publicly available and create a synthetic identity, and then go into a branch bank in Los Angeles, reportedly being me, and apply for credit and have all the indicia of being John Yanchunis, when in fact they're not. So while some information may be perceived to be not sensitive, cobbled together with other information can be very damaging to consumers.
Do we know at this point if the person that sold the information, if have been used or something?
So there is evidence that that information was given to others. Who those are, we don't know yet. How that information has been used, it may take a while for that information to manifest in terms of an injury. It obviously has a monetary value, as I mentioned, on the dark web, and it was taken for malicious purposes, and it wasn't to just simply injure the company. I think this person took some pride in taking it, and it was for purposes of turning it into money. So it will be used in some fashion in the very near future. And that's what we look for, is the temporal connection between the breach and then the consequences of that.
Does it matter to the case that, unlike data breaches where you have, someone overseas sending in a phishing email or breaching a system from outside, that this seems like more of an inside job?
It doesn't matter whatsoever. I've settled, I've litigated cases of internal theft as well as external, and some involving state-sponsored parties, which does occur. Yahoo was allegedly one of those, and yet we know from the indictment of the individuals involved in one of the breaches within Yahoo, they used that for monetary purposes.
Just so we have it, can you say and spell your name so we make sure we're doing it all properly?
Sure, my name is John Yanchunis. It's spelled Yanchunis.
And the official title we should give you?
I'm a partner at Morgan & Morgan, and I head the class action department,
Is it Jon or JOHN?
JOHN.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If there are any questions on the phone, to unmute yourself, press *4. Okay. If
Okay.
nobody else has any questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes.
Thanks
And
very
thank
much
you
for having us.
Yes, thank you for
Appreciate it.
coming, I appreciate it.